Well, good evening, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us. We know people are going to continue joining, but we have a busy program, so let's get started. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture, and founder of the Parent Education Series, now in its 19th year. We are delighted to have with us tonight author and educator Jess Lahey, whose book, The Gift of Failure, appeared about 10 years ago and really changed the landscape for parenting. But today we're going to be looking at sort of the new landscape, the gift of failure, increasing motivation, competence, and self-efficacy in our kids. So we're really looking forward to what Jess has to say. Please join me, everybody, in a really warm welcome for Jessica Lahey. Take it away, Jess.
Thank you so much. Charlene asked me a great question right before we started, which was, the gift of failure. It's going to be at 10 years, if you can believe it, 10 years in August since the book came out. I'm going to be doing something special, don't worry. But she asked if there's anything that has changed in my thinking since that book came out. And the thing that has really changed my thinking is since I wrote The Addiction Inoculation, and I want to talk for a second about why I wrote both books. The Addiction Inoculation has really added to that picture. So I wrote The Gift of Failure. I sold that book first in 2013, right after I'd written an article for The Atlantic called Why Parents Need to Let Their Children Fail, that went viral and led to the sale of this book. I had been chasing the person who's now my agent for like 10 years. She'd rejected like every project I'd sent to her. So I finally got to work with this agent that I love, and we worked on the book together. And so right after I sold the book, I was faced with my sort of final straw, the last thing, the last piece in my puzzle, as I like to say. I have a metaphor for this. Realizing that I was an alcohol, I am an alcoholic, and that I really, in order to write this book, in order to balance writing and teaching, in order to be the parent I wanted to be, in order to be the human I wanted to be, and stay married and all those things, that I was going to have to get sober. So when I got sober in 2013, June 7th, 2013, not coincidentally my mother's birthday, because I got blackout drunk at her birthday party, not something I recommend. It was pretty awful. I sort of, my first thought after I got a hold of my own addled brain was, oh my gosh, I have two kids. And wait a second, I was raised by an alcoholic, and one of my parents was raised by an alcoholic, and so on and so on and so on. And P.S., on my husband's side of the family, there's also a lot of substance use disorder. So what does that mean for my children? Like, I don't know, genetics? I mean, are they doomed? I don't know any of these things. And I started to teach after I had about a year of sobriety. I started to teach in a drug and alcohol rehab for adolescents. And I started to think a lot about what we as educators, mentors, teachers, educators, administrators, counselors could have done differently for those kids that might have changed their path. It's not our fault when our children, start misusing drugs or alcohol. It's not our fault when our students are misusing drugs and alcohol. But there are things that we can do to change the statistics. And the confluence of those two books, of The Gift of Failure and of The Addiction Inoculation, they come together around the idea of competence and self-efficacy and self-advocacy and self-esteem, and but mostly competence and self-efficacy. And so that's where I'm going to focus tonight. This is a gift of failure. This is a gift of failure presentation in name, but I will be sneaking in some substance use prevention, because what I have found, it is a lot harder for me to get you to come to something labeled substance use prevention, because it's scary. It is a topic that is difficult to swallow. It's a topic that a lot of people would like to not think about. And certainly when I was actively drinking, I never would have shown up for a substance use prevention thing. It would have hit a little too close to home, but it's incredibly important. And so I'm going to do a very short interlude, a little primer on substance use prevention from The Addiction Inoculation that'll sort of give you an idea of just where we stand with that stuff. So, as I said, when I sold The Gift of Failure, I was a middle school teacher. And here, I love middle school so much, I can hardly explain it. When people ask me what my favorite grade is to teach, it happens to be seventh grade. I think sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, depending on the model. I've seen 5, 6, 7, 8. I've seen uh, 7, 8. I've seen 6, 7, 8, 9, which I also really love. It gives the older kids more of a chance to be leaders. But middle school is this incredible time where it is a setup. If you have read The Gift of Failure, I say this really plainly, because the brain develops from the bottom up. think of it as you may have seen like this before, where like the inside in here, that's sort of the lower brain stuff, and this stuff up here in the front, the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, that stuff doesn't get hooked up until the early to mid 20s. It isn't totally done until the early to mid 20s. So in middle school, we suddenly thrust these children, and they really are children, which is what's so wonderful about middle school. They're on the precipice. I call them my pupa people. I love them so much. They're still open, they're still not really guarded, and yet at the same time, we're asking them to act like adults for the first time, really. And it is a setup because we ask way more of them than their brains could ever handle. When I go to schools and talk to kids, this is where I focus a lot of my talk, because for them, they feel like they are stupid because they can't do all the things we want them to do, from remembering their stuff every day, to packing their soccer cleats when they need to changing classes at the right time, and remembering how their schedule works, and remembering their locker combination, and oh, PS, there are hormones and all that sort of stuff. They really do feel stupid. And one of the other things that I hear from kids a lot, I give all the kids that I ever speak to my email address. So, for example, a welcome video went out to a school where I'll be speaking in a couple weeks. And I gave them all the kids my email address. And now my email inbox is filled with the most amazing questions from kids. And sometimes I'll say, just ask me questions about what you want to understand and know about based on the things that I happen to be an expert in. Or tell me what you want me to tell your parents when I meet with them the evening after I talk to you. And one of the things that I hear a lot from them is that they truly do believe that they are loved more when they get good grades and when they're sort of pleasing us with their performance, and less when they're getting low grades or not pleasing us with their performance. So, helping kids understand that cognitive development, that middle school all the way through to the beginning, well, really from the beginning of puberty until the early to mid 20s, that period of development in their brain cannot be rushed. There's nothing I can do or say, or nothing you as parents can do or say to rush that. And it doesn't have anything to do. Okay, I hate absolutes. It has incredibly, vanishingly little to do with intelligence. In fact, sometimes the inverse is true. That kids who have really serious, for example, executive function issues, sometimes it's just a matter of, and kids, neurotypical kids who are struggling with executive function, because that's their job, is to struggle with executive function during puberty and adolescence. And they really, like I mentioned, feel dumb when they can't get these things done. But I explain to them that it's a matter of two synapses making contact and starting to talk to each other, in the same way that in middle school I teach books that are sometimes beyond them in terms of understanding, like metaphor and symbolism. That's a higher brain function. And for some kids, I'll talk about metaphors and they will have no idea what I'm talking about. It goes right over their heads. But I don't stop talking about it because I think they can't handle it. I continue to scaffold that knowledge to support everyone where they are, but continue to give them that, because magically, and this is what keeps us in the classroom, magically someday, and sometimes it's seventh grade, sometimes it's eighth grade, it depends on the kid, suddenly those two synapses are going to start talking to each other, and their eyes are going to get really big, and they're going to say, oh, that's what she's been talking about. And it's that I can live off of that for years. I there were many years in the classroom where that was really what was getting me through. So, helping them understand that that's not a matter of intelligence. That's not a failing on their part. It's not a failing on your part. It's not a failing on my part that those synapses haven't started to talk to each other yet. All we can do for them is to continue to support them while they find ways, strategies to deal with their executive function, the holes in their executive function development, and the holes in their ability to understand, various aspects of whatever it is we're learning about. But so I say to them, it is not your fault that you can't remember your homework every single day, but it is your responsibility to come up with strategies, which is the reason middle school is so fertile for these sorts of things, because middle school is more than they can handle. We set it up that way. So my job is to walk around all day long and watch kids fail, watch kids make egregious mistakes. It's fantastic. Now, here's the thing. as parents, you probably know, and there are usually a fair number of teachers in the audience as well, you probably know that at the moment you notice your child making an egregious error, that is not always the best moment for learning. So it's my job to keep all of those egregious errors in my head and wait until the kid has had a snack, feeling calm. Squeaky the guinea pig didn't die last night, because we know that the one of the fastest ways to interrupt learning is to introduce stress. So on a day when, if a kid is food insecure, or their parents are getting a divorce and they're really stressed out over that, I have to take into account that they're not as much in a learning place. It's going to be more difficult for them to take on new information. So I wait for those learning moments, and increasingly what was happening, at least in my experience over these 20 years of teaching, that increasingly those learning moments, I would wait for them, they would turn up, and it would be just time, and then inevitably a parent would run in with the missing homework, and the kid would look at me like, well, why do I need to come up with a strategy? Because that's going to be my strategy, right? So I admittedly was on a very high horse, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I am the noble teacher, and you parent people are ruining it for me. And then I found out, if you've read The Gift of Failure, you know that I had a 9-year-old child who could not tie their own shoes. My daughter could not tie her own shoes, and she was 9. And the reason I didn't know is because she hid it from me, because she was so ashamed. And that wasn't her fault. I did that to her. I did that to her because I just kept tying her shoes for her, because she would freak out, and I didn't like seeing her say things like, I'm so dumb, I can never tie my own shoes, or I can just never do it, or whatever the thing is. I didn't like seeing her freak out and think of herself as stupid. So I would do it for her. Plus, it's just faster if I do it. And then I got Velcro shoes, and then I got slip-on shoes, and we just avoided it until she was at an age where it was humiliating for her, and she could no longer seek help for it because it was so embarrassing for her. Um, I did that to her. And that was when the professional and the personal came together, and I realized that this was a book that I needed, both as a teacher and as a parent. And The Gift of Failure is really about a couple of things. It's about um, boosting the chances that our kids are going to be engaged in school for the sake of school itself, for the sake of whatever it is they're learning, for the sake of learning piano, for the sake of practicing soccer. This idea of process over product, right? We need them to believe us when we say to them, sweetie, it's okay that you made a mistake. What I care is that you learn from this, because right now they don't believe us. I talk to thousands and thousands of kids a year, and they do not believe us when we say that. They think that's just something we're supposed to say, like, I love you, or your painting is really good, or no, 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 you're such a talented dancer. They think that we're just supposed to say that stuff. So right now they don't believe us. And the problem is, it's not like if I give you these 3 steps to boosting what we call intrinsic motivation, motivation that comes from inside of you, that drives you to want to be better at something, that drives you to want to do something with all your spare time, that kind of thing. I'm not some Pollyanna. It's not like I'm going to tell you these things and suddenly your kid is going to be like, woohoo, quadratic formula, I'm so excited, because it's not going to happen. In fact, at that school I just told you about, where all these emails started pouring in from kids, about a quarter of them are, how do I find something interesting in this class so that I can engage? Like, there are all these kids who are like, yeah, I like some of my classes, but some of them are just so boring and I cannot engage. How do I do that? And that's the secret sauce of parenting. It's the secret sauce of teaching. And frankly, when I do professional development at schools, often I'll do like talk to the kids during the day, and the staff, in the teaching staff, in the afternoon, and parents in the evening, or community in the evening. One of my main jobs is to get everyone on the same vocabulary, start conversations, prime conversations. I do a lot of teaching kids about I statements. Like they'll say things like, "Oh, I can't say that to my parents; it'll just make them mad or defensive." And so I teach them ways to say things, and then I tell the parents, "By the way, if your kid comes to you with an I statement about how they feel, this is really important, and you need to listen because I taught them that earlier today." So they're phrasing it that way on purpose, so that in the hopes that you will listen. So that's part of my job, is to start conversations. But ideally, my job is also to help kids find ways to engage, even if they don't feel like they have a lot of what we're going to talk about in a second, which is called autonomy, a lot of control in their lives. And a lot of kids do not feel like they have any control over their future, over what classes they take, over lots of stuff. And that is a vital element of getting kids intrinsically motivated. It's also, just so you know, kids who are more controlled by their parents tend to lie to their parents way more. So if for no other reason, give your kids some space and control, so that hopefully you can build a relationship where they don't feel the need to lie as much. Because kids tell me that if they're heavily controlled by their parents, that they're just going to make stuff up so that they can have something that's theirs, even if it's fake, even if it's a lie, even if it's a little white lie about where they're going with their friends. No, they're not going to the coffee shop, they're going to the sandwich shop, but they just need to establish some control over the situation. So that little white lie is just there for them to feel like they have some autonomy. So I'm not trying to convey to you that if you do these things that I'm about to talk to you about, these three things I was just I'm going to introduce in a second, that your kids will be all in, but it will up the stakes, or the likelihood that your kids will be engaged for the sake of the thing itself. Because the secret is the thing that, well, it's not a secret. We've known for 60 years, or the researchers have known for like 60 years, that carrots and sticks don't work. So by carrots and sticks, I'm talking about extrinsic motivators, which unfortunately for me mean grades, points, scores, honors, test scores, all those things. But they are also things like, sweetie, if you get an A or better, you'll get $50 a class. Or sweetie, if you're on a roll the entire time you're in high school, you can have a car at graduation. I hear these kinds of things all the time. Or kids getting paid for grades, or kids getting stuff in exchange for grades, and then there's the sort of ones we perceive as negative, like, sweetie, if you don't keep a B or better, you're grounded. Or if you don't get a B or better, we're taking away your electronics, which, for people who do not have fully wired up brains, that makes no sense whatsoever. It has nothing to do with logical consequences, nothing to do with natural consequences. It makes no sense. So anyway, that's another carrot and stick that we tend to use a lot. But we also do things like, oh, I don't know, logging on to that parent portal like 24/7 and just checking on every grade and point and score. That's an extrinsic motivator. It's also called surveillance. There's also, watching your kids on their phones and checking how they drive certain places. One 17-year-old kid told me that not only do his parents track him on his phone, but that they critique the routes that he takes when he gets home. Yes. Not saying you can't do these things, not saying you can't use the portal, not saying you can't track your kids, not saying you can't read their emails, their texts, all those sort of things. Although, just to add as a contrast, I've never read any of my children's emails, and I've never read any of their texts, and I've never tracked my kids. That's just a personal choice. So there's this over here, and then there's non-hyperventilation zone, middle of the road stuff that I'll talk about too. But all of these things are extrinsic motivators, right? So we're trying to control their behavior with levers that we impose on them. And we know these don't work. These do not work for long-term motivation. This is not my research. This is Edward Dici's research. You may have read Dan Pink's Drive. The research, he based a lot of his work on the research of Edward Dici. It's fascinating stuff. Anyway, 60 years, almost 70 now, of really good research showing that if you want to boost long-term motivation and engagement in kids, that carrots and sticks don't work, with a few exceptions. And by the way, another common one we see a lot is sticker charts. Those don't work either, except there's an exception. There's a loophole for sticker charts, and that's potty training. Because something about getting out of diapers and getting into big boy, big girl underpants is an intrinsic motivation. So there is a loophole for potty training. So have at it with the sticker charts. Okay. If we want to boost the chances our kids are going to be intrinsically motivated, we have to give them more autonomy. Like I said, this is Edward Deci. And by the way, his book, Why We Do What We Do, really amazing book. If you look in the chat, there is a link to my speaking bibliography, and I update it at least once a month with new releases that I'm really loving, especially books that have this many sticky notes in them. And it links to videos and it links to all kinds of things, and that's in the chat. I'm going to be talking about a lot of books. Someone in the chat said my kids asked me why I wouldn't pay them grades because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. In fact, in the gift of failure, I say it really plainly. If you want your kids to not want to learn math, pay them for their grades. It's also why we don't pay kids for chores or household duties, because household duties are something that we do because we're part of a family, because we all work together to keep the family running. And in fact, there's research to show that when kids help keep the family running during just normal times, whether that's by doing household duties, whether that was in one study where kids during the Depression brought in a little bit of extra pennies by doing piecework, sewing work, when kids are helping keep the family moving forward, that when bad stuff happens, if someone in the family gets ill, if COVID happens, if bad things happen, the kids suffer fewer negative emotional sequelae, fewer negative things in terms of their mental health. So that's really go back up to all the way to the top of the history. I'm going to paste it in again here, all the resources I was talking about before. So we have to be thinking about giving kids more autonomy, more control. And that more autonomy, more control, I don't have time to talk about it, but in the bibliography is some wonderful research by Wendy Grolnick. I outline that research in The Gift of Failure and explain how that works. What we know about giving kids more autonomy and being what's called an autonomy supportive parent. And I have a book around here over there somewhere that I meant to bring over and show you, called The Autonomy Supportive Parent by Emily Edlin. It's in the bibliography. What we know is that kids who have autonomy supportive parents who support their choices, their ways they want to do it, don't jump in, don't take over, all that kind of stuff, those kids are more comfortable with feelings of frustration they may feel when they get stuck. Whereas kids who have more, I don't like to use the word controlling because it's just, I don't want to be called controlling. It's just my own pet peeve. And P.S., I need you to listen to me. And if I make you mad, you'll log off. So I need you to listen to me. So let's use the word directive. Kids who have overly directive parents or teachers, I have seen directive teachers too. And I'll get to some of these questions. And sorry about the link not working. Go to jessicalahey.com and under speaking, there's a box. Scroll down a little and there's a box that says download speaking bibliography. Use that link. jessicalahey.com under speaking, there's a link. Okay, so when we give kids more autonomy and we help them we support them, we don't abandon them, but we let them have some choice about how they do things and in what order they do things. And we don't step in when they start to get frustrated. We let them sort of feel that, as opposed to kids who have directive parents who don't even let them get frustrated, who step in before the kid even gets frustrated. You know, when they're like doing their homework and they go, oh, and then we run in. We're like, what? How can I help? How can I reteach all of Algebra 1 so that you will feel good about yourself? Or take the pencil away and start doing their homework for them. Those kids who have highly directive parents are a lot less likely to be able to complete tasks that are challenging for them. Whereas parents who have autonomy supportive parents are a lot more likely to be able to complete tasks that are challenging for them. Okay. Autonomy was our first thing, more control. Don't have time to go into a lot of details like about how you do that, but I'm telling you, there are scripts in Gift of Failure. There's like, here's precisely what to do and how to do it given various situations. Number 2, autonomy was number 1. Number 2, we have to give kids more competence, not confidence. I know we're really good at that. Sweetie, you're so good at this. You're so smart. You're so talented. You're so perfect. You just fell out of the womb good at math. That is not very helpful in terms that gives them confidence, and that's great. Confidence is wonderful. Competence is, in my mind anyway, better. I mean, the 7 C's of resilience, confidence is in there and competence is in there. So they are the building blocks of resilience. But competence has to do with skills based on actual confidence. Like you have confidence because you have actual skills. And those can't be taken away from you. Like if you're just confident that you're going to get that you're the best dancer in the world, and then you have your dance recital and you find out you're not the best dancer in the world, your confidence can be shattered. But if you are competent because you have a skill, like you know how to change a tire, and someone laughs at you and says, "Oh, you can't change a tire," it doesn't do anything to me. I know I can. I have that skill. That is a skill that I have displayed and I know I have it, especially if it's a skill that I have earned myself. Like if I've had to struggle a little bit to figure that out. Now, one of the most powerful teaching tools I have as a teacher and as a parent, really, is something called desirable difficulties. And they're in this book. It doesn't look like this anymore. They changed the cover, called Make It Stick. For the teachers in the audience, there are 2 books that you have to read. One is Mindset by Carol Dweck, and one is Make It Stick. Make It Stick out of Harvard University Press. There's 2 topics in here. I'm going to talk about, well, there's a lot more than that, but there are 2 in here that are done beautifully. One is desirable difficulties. One is formative assessment. Don't have time for that. It's not even in the sphere of what we're talking about tonight, but it's incredibly powerful. But desirable difficulties. Desirable difficulties are tasks that are a little bit more difficult to parse, to figure out. The instructions are challenging. I loved teaching Latin. I was a Latin teacher as well as English and writing. And Latin was fun for me to teach because it's loaded with desirable difficulties. And don't worry, I'm going to scroll through here and get to some of these questions as they come up. The desirable difficulties, what they do is kind of magic. When something is a little bit frustrating, when it's right on the edge of your ability level, when you have to work to figure it out, it engages your brain to do something called encoding. And your brain takes the information and puts it not in the short-term memory part of your brain, but in the long-term memory part of your brain. It encodes the information. And what's really important about that is we need that information there if we're going to use it like in new domains, in other subjects, in new scenarios, that kind of thing. So it's like a magic trick for learning. And speaking of which, there's, if you want a really, really great book about what really works for learning, including things like desirable difficulties, Dan Willingham, who's a psychology professor at the School of Education at University of Virginia, has a book called Outsmart Your Brain. It's one I really recommend for kids even, because this is about the learning stuff that actually works, not the stuff we think works, like using highlighters is awful. We should take highlighters away from all children. They don't know how to use them, but Outsmart Your Brain is really, really great. The other book I mentioned for teachers, someone just asked, was Make It Stick and Mindset by Carol Dweck. These are the 2 books for teachers that I cannot recommend highly enough. After reading Mindset, I went back and took Algebra 1 again when I was 43, because my 7th grade math teacher told me that I wasn't a math person. And he created what is known as a fixed mindset in me about my abilities. That's Carol Dweck's term. And I believed him. And I got so mad after I read Carol Dweck. And after reading Mindset, I got a whole new understanding of how my brain works and how intelligence happens. Okay, let's get back on track. Okay, so autonomy, competence. Again, let's think about this for a second. If desirable difficulties are as powerful as I say they are, because they're as powerful as these people say they are, and these people are, this is Harvard School of Education people, then let's think about who can benefit from desirable difficulties. If in order to get the benefits of the desirable difficulty, you have to struggle with it for a bit, it's not going to be the kids who give up really quickly, who get frustrated and give up. And those are the kids who have parents who are highly directive or controlling. Those kids give up when they start to feel frustrated because they don't have the emotional wherewithal. They don't have the familiarity with that feeling of frustration to sit it out and know that it's going to be okay and that they can take a breath or reread the instructions. Whereas the kids who have the autonomy supportive parents were a lot more likely to complete tasks that were challenging for them and therefore are a lot more likely to benefit from desirable difficulties, right? There's a whole section on competence, again, that I don't have time to talk about tonight. It's in Gift of Failure, and it's Carol Dweck's mindset has been oversimplified in the media to an egregious, horrible degree. I just use the word egregious a lot, and it's not a normal word for me. Um, Carol Dweck's mindset, the articles about it would have you believe that we should never tell kids they're smart and only praise them on their effort. And that's just stupid. That is a stupid oversimplification of her work. That's not what that means. And so I would encourage people to read Mindset or even read the synopsis I did of it in Gift of Failure. It's really it's an incredible book. Autonomy, competence, competence, competence. Competence is also so important because competence feeds something called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief that if I don't like what's happening around me, if I don't like the way someone's treating me, if I don't like the situation at work, if I don't like the way I'm being treated in that internship, or I don't like the way that teacher's talking to me, that I could take action and positive change could result. Self-efficacy is one of the most valuable things we can give kids. Now, when I was teaching in the rehab, I taught two kinds of kids with really low levels of self-efficacy. We had a lot of kids at the rehab who, yes, kids who had grown up in group homes and in foster care, kids who had been neglected and abused, kids who understood that their ability to change anything in their life was really limited. They did not have the ability to like control where they were going to be living next, or whether they had food to eat the next day, or whether they were going to get to stay in the same school with their friends. So they had often really low levels of self-efficacy, which, that's kind of what a lot of people expect I'm talking about when I talk about teaching in a rehab. But we also had the kids from the really hoity-toity New England private schools at my rehab. Not my rehab, but you know what I mean. And those kids, what I heard from them is that they had so little control over their lives, their future, their career. I heard from one kid who told me that there was no like plan A, plan B for her. There was only her parents' plan for her, which was to go to Stanford and then go to Stanford Medical School and be a surgeon. And I said, so, what is there a backup? And she's like, no, that's it. That's the plan. And she had no control. She was never allowed to choose her classes. She was never allowed to, sort of make any changes in her life herself. They controlled everything. And she also had an incredibly low level of self-efficacy. So both these kids have a really low level of a feeling of control, a feeling of if I take action, I can make change happen. And that's such an essential element of hope, right? There's this book I love that's also in the bibliography called Making Hope Happen. And it's by a brilliant man who we've lost, unfortunately, named Shane Lopez. Shane described hope as two things: the belief that your world can be better, that your immediate world, that the world out there can be better, and that you have the power to help make it so. That's self-efficacy. And when kids have self-efficacy, they tend to have much lower rates of substance use, because substance use is not something that kids pick up because of peer pressure. In fact, we know for a fact, another survey just came out this year talking about asking kids why they use. And we expected the answer to be peer pressure. That's the big one, right? Another kid made my wonderful kid do it. But actually, what they said was it was stress and it was anxiety and it was a feeling of not being enough the way they were. So in the Addiction Inoculation, I quote Chris Herron, who says, and he was a Boston Celtic had his worst moment in his addiction career was such a New England experience. And for those of you on the West Coast, you may not get quite how New England of an experience this is, but he was high on opiates, I believe heroin at the time, and ran into the side of a Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, there is no more New England way to flame out in your addiction. But he now says one of the things he says is we pay a lot of attention to the last day, like Chris driving into the side of a Dunkin' Donuts, as opposed to the first day. And that's what we should be paying attention to. And that's my job now. Like if you whittle down, if I whittle down, if I distill down what my job is to its bare essence, it's starting conversations and it's helping kids feel seen, heard, known, and loved for who they are, for who they actually are, feeling like that they are enough, because that's at the genesis of where kids tend to pick up substances. Yes, they're also doing it to numb pain. You know, opiates are work on pain and pain, emotional pain and physical pain, sort of the same thing. So there's a lot of elements there of, you know, kids trying to numb out, but it's a lot of kids not feeling heard, seen, known, loved for who they are. And that's really an important part of this picture. So a really quick primer, I just want to throw a few things in here. Number one, yes, genetics is a factor in substance use disorder. And we're not really supposed to say addiction. We're supposed to say substance use disorder. It's a person first. I am a woman with alcohol use disorder. So my kids were born to me, they're my biological children, so they are at increased risk of developing substance use disorder. But then so are myself and my sister. I have alcohol use disorder, my sister does not. So there's some elements there that are genetics is from what we understand, according to the best research, about 50 to 60% of the risk picture. The rest of it is trauma, stress, capital S stress, chronic stress, not little stresses. Lisa D'Amour's book, Under Pressure, is a fantastic book for talking about the difference between capital S stress or toxic stress and like the everyday stressful things that keep us moving forward. Like I sometimes will email my agent and say, hey, expect a chapter by next Friday because I need that added stress to kick me in the pants and keep me going. Helping kids reframe and understand the differences can be really, really important. So yes, there's a genetic component, but the rest of it really comes down to stress, trauma, what we call adverse childhood experiences. Some of you may know of them as something that comes out of the CDC and a study with Kaiser Permanente. Humongous study. Adverse childhood experiences are things you experience as a child that are really create chronic toxic trauma stress. This book by Nadine Burke Harris, she was your Surgeon General in California, actually. She provides a list that's longer than the CDC's that I think is actually really important. She includes things systemic racism and adoption and medical trauma and things like that. Whereas the CDC's list tends to focus on things like physical and sexual abuse, a parent in prison, addiction in the home, violence in the home, things like that. The Deepest Well is a fantastic book. I want to really quickly just fill you in that number one, the younger a kid is when they first use substances, the higher their lifelong risk of developing substance use disorder. So if they are in 8th grade, when they first start using substances, they have approaching a 50% lifelong chance of developing substance use disorder. If they're in 10th grade, it drops by half, over half. And if they wait until 12th grade, it drops by over half again. And so delay is really the name of the game here. Adolescent substance use is not the same thing as adult substance use. It's just not. The adolescent brain is developing, it's called plastic, and which means it's acutely susceptible to environmental things that are happening environmentally, whether that's changing the dopamine cycle in the brain. Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke, by the way, is a great book if you want to understand the dopamine cycle. Anna Lemke she's fantastic. She's at Stanford, actually. The So delay is important because if we can get them to, let's just say 18, let's go crazy. Let's say 18, not even 21. If we can get them towards the end of that brain development piece of their lives, then we are preserving their brains and giving them the chance to become their best possible selves, their best cognitive selves. So that's really, really important. If you, and I'm looking at you people, even though I can't see any of you people, I'm just here in a room by myself, which is weird. Let me explain that to you. That the myth of if I just let my kids have sips at home because I want them to grow up to be like those European drinkers, right? Where it's no big deal. So that like if they go out to their first keg party, they'll be like, oh, I've had sips with my parents. It's no big deal. That doesn't work. That does not work for a few reasons. Number one, I will never be able to learn moderation by being modeled moderation. No matter how many people I watch drink moderately, I can't drink moderately. That's number one. Number two, if you're using Europe, the European region, the European area as your romantic ideal for moderate drinking, you're going to need to look at some statistics. So the European, according to the European Union as a whole, sorry, according to the World Health Organization, sorry, the European Union as a whole has the highest rates of disease attributable to alcohol and death attributable to alcohol. 7 of the 10 heaviest drinking countries in the entire world are in the European region. We've got, I was just in a heavily German town recently, and I had to tell them that Germany, right, is number 4 and has some of the youngest drinking ages in the world, and they have a major problem. Yes, there are exceptions. You can yell at me all you want. I made 6 videos because so many people yelled at me about the European thing, and I had to break every country down and talk about every country individually. So if you go look at the videos at jessicalahey.com, they're there. You can argue with me all you want. Email me. I'm going to give you my email at the end of this. And if you're on the, oh, well, kids are going to drink anyway, so I might as well just give them take their keys and have the alcohol here. Not only are you increasing your child's risk for developing substance use disorder, you're also increasing your children's friends' risk for developing substance use disorder because peer cohort is such an important part of this picture. And by the way, you're wrong. Most kids say, when you look at the numbers of kids who are drinking, it is the vast minority of kids who are drinking the vast majority of the alcohol. In fact, for example, on college campuses, it's the heaviest drinking kids on college campuses who are drinking 72% of the alcohol consumed on college campuses. So that whole it's going to happen anyway, harm reduction, and I'm a fan of harm reduction, but not in this case. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Okay. So finally, and let's get to the sort of the nitty gritty of this: autonomy, competence, self-efficacy, and connection. When I said when I do this for teachers, this can take 90 minutes. It's so much fun. It's about relevance and engagement and making topics relevant and all that, and helping kids envision what they can do with that knowledge, blah, 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 blah. But for parents, it's really quite simple. Number 1, we have to love the kids we have, not the kids we wish we had, we thought we had, we wanted to have. They're not sort of our mini-me's, because when I ask kids what they want me to tell their parents when I come to speak at their schools, the number 1 email I get in various iterations is, please tell my parents I'm not my brother, I'm not my sister, I'm not them when they were my age, and I am not their do-over. That is the email I get the most from kids. They do not feel seen, heard, known, loved for who they are. And furthermore, number 2, we can't just love them based on their performance, because that's how they're feeling. 85% of middle school students tell me that they really truly believe their parents love them more when they get high grades and less when they get low grades. And it's even higher in high school. So what do? I'm going to leave you with this. We focus on the process and less on the end product. We focus on the difference between an A and an F is, what did you do to get this grade? We can have the same, we can freak out internally all we want, but we can also have conversations with our kid about, oh, you got an F on your French test when you thought you were going to get an A. Well, how did you study? What are you going to leave behind? What are you going to do differently next time? What are you going to take with you that worked? Your friend got an A and you got an F. Well, what did your friend do that you didn't do? Did you get an extra hour of sleep last night, or did you study for an extra hour? Because this woman, Mrs. Lahey, told me that kids are sleep deprived, and that an extra hour of sleep is far superior to an extra hour of reviewing when it comes to memory consolidation. So think about focusing more on the process. Our kids will believe us when we say, sweetie, it's okay that you made a mistake. What I care is that you learn from it. They will also believe us when we say that we're here for them when they make mistakes, especially if that's around drugs and alcohol. We need for them to be able to come to us and talk to us. It also means that they know they can talk to us about the stuff that's hard, and that we will not be there in judgment, that we will be there for a conversation about how to be better next time, how to do better next time. And the finally, as parents, that's all we could ever want to model for them, right? Like if for example, I've been giving my kids sips of alcohol, or I've been doing my kids homework for them because I thought I was helping. And believe me, you should see how many math teachers tell me that they often get homework back with math that is just not math they've even taught yet. It's like happening everywhere. Homework is information for the teacher, it's feedback for the teacher. It is not meant to be framed. So yeah. um that when we do too much for our kids, when we're and we say to them, you know what, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought giving sips was going to help you be a moderate drinker, but I learned that actually the longer you go without using in your adolescent brain, that the stronger your brain will be. You won't risk all these parts of your brain that are so susceptible to alcohol and weed and all these other drugs and alcohol. um, and and we're going to change what we do around here. I'm going to allow you to have more autonomy. I'm going to let you take responsibility for things. And here are my very clear expectations, and here are the very clear natural or logical consequences if you don't fulfill those expectations. And yes, I explain that fully in The Gift of Failure. And I'll be here for you because you're going to screw up, because I do it all the time. And let me tell you, we'll be talking about that at the dinner table too, because modeling how we handle our mistakes, our failures, and bringing them into that conversation is one of the most important things that we can do for our kids. Okay, let's go back and talk about some of these questions, because there's some really, really good ones in here. And I'm going to also apologize to the interpreter because I have not been good about slowing down my language. Okay, how do I find the resource? Okay, we got that. Again, that bibliography is at jessicalahey.com under speaking, and I update it at least once a month with books that aren't even out yet. There's a wonderful book I have around here that's not even out yet, and I mentioned that. I have one who could care less about grades, since that's naturally intrinsic. Yeah, so remember I told you that the kids are constantly asking me how to get engaged at school. And that's all, it all really all comes down to relevance and emotions. So Mary Helen Imordino Yang, who's at USC, she does amazing research on, one of her books is on the bibliography. She does amazing research on learning and emotion, learning and emotion, learning in the brain, learning and emotion. So what I help kids do is find a way to make the material relevant for them. The analogy I give is I could care less about NASCAR. It's just not my thing. I don't care. I'm never going to, you know how it's hard to remember things when you just don't care? So I'm never going to remember the rules of NASCAR. But then someone came up to me and explained to me that NASCAR comes out of prohibition rum running, and even some of the rules come from that. So all of a sudden I'm in. Like, I'm fascinated by that. Tell me more. Someone taught me once what I could actually use the quadratic formula for in real life. Is it a plausible thing that I will be in charge of a space shuttle launch and I won't have a stopwatch with me? No, probably not. But I do know I could use the quadratic formula to figure out when the space shuttle was going to leave our atmosphere. Okay. Um, let's see. Okay. There's a question in here about differently wired kids, which is why, so one of the most important things that I do in my job as an expert in certain things is to not overstep my expertise. I am not an expert in kids, neuroatypical kids, in kids with differences in how they process, whether that's ADHD, whether that's autism. Although, where they intersect with, for example, substance use prevention, I do have a level of expertise, but I always will defer to the real experts. Debbie Reber, Reber, has, and many of you have probably heard of her, she has a community at her website, Tilt Parenting, of parents of kids, neurodivergent kids. And she brings in experts in various aspects of that in order to give parents really good evidence-based, research-backed information. And that's why I'm not giving you information, is that is not something I'm an expert in, and I refuse to overstep my expertise bounds, even though it seems like people do it all the time. I also want to answer. See, I'm Gen X. Someone here is talking about Gen Z. I'm Gen X. I'm 54, so don't be going Gen Z being old. Let's see. Make it stick. Books are in here. Okay, my email, in case I don't get to your question, my email is teacherlahey, teacher Lahey, at gmail.com. I'm currently doing battle with 53 emails from kids in Houston in my inbox, but I will get to your question. I will answer every single one, and if I don't have a great answer, I will find the answer, or I will give you a resource. Again, there are over 400 videos at my website on every aspect of the gift of failure, the addiction inoculation, and I have a new series on student questions. And so probably your answer is in there. So I would love it if you'd either watch those or read my books before asking the question, but that would be great. Can you tell us how to help kids be intrinsically motivated? It's really those three things. Give kids more choice and autonomy. It's like when you have a toddler and it's cold outside, you don't say, sweetie, it's cold outside. Do you want to wear a hat? You say, sweetie, it's cold outside. Would you like to wear a red hat or a blue hat? Anytime you can get buy-in, you're going to automatically raise the level of intrinsic motivation when the kid is getting engaged in the thing, even if it's a thing they don't like. So in my classroom, independent reading shelf, more choices, more choice. I give the kids more choices. If I'm going to be teaching Shakespeare, I'll say, here are two of my favorite Shakespeares to teach. Let's talk about both of them. Which one would you like me to teach next? And we'll have a vote. Anytime I give them the opportunity to have buy-in, to choose, that is going to increase their interest. I do not belong to a book club because the minute someone tells me that I have to read a particular book, it automatically becomes the last book I want to read. I do not know why the crayfish sing or the crawfish sing. I'm probably never going to know because everyone said I had to read that book. And so I refused to read it. My children, same way. I wanted them to read A Wrinkle in Time because it meant a lot to me. What's the one book that neither of my children have read? A Wrinkle in Time. It's on principle. So anytime we can do choice, that's going to help. So that's autonomy. Help them feel more competent, not just confident. Help give them skills. Let them develop skills. Let them climb trees from a young age when it's less challenging for them and less dangerous for them. Let them load the dishwasher the way they want to do it. I know you love north south, but they like east west. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give you a link in just a second to one of my favorite, actually, speaking of the dishwasher. Here's one of my favorite posts on that I've ever done. And I wrote it just for fun, which was a testament to sometimes when you do things just for the love of the thing, it ends up resonating with other people. This happens to be my most popular blog post ever. And it's about doing laundry. It's about doing laundry. Yeah, having kids do laundry. Let's see. People are arguing about Gen Z and Gen X. Okay, ADHD. Again, I'm going to recommend Deb Reber's book, but at the same time, it's really hard for kids who have something going on in their brains that makes it so it's harder for them to engage. It's going to be even more important for a kid with ADHD for you to show them how that topic is relevant for them. As a teacher, it's a nightmare. I can't figure out how the subject I'm teaching is individually relevant to each kid, but I better try because, or I'm going to lose them. I taught Latin. Let me just repeat. Latin. And I had to find ways to make that culturally, linguistically, personally relevant for the kids, or I was out of, or they just weren't going to take my class. So you have to do that. And so are you a Trump supporter? Just answer the question. I'm not going to answer that question. It's not, I don't have to answer that question because I need for you all to listen to me, and I'm going to piss off some of you and not other ones. And so, no, I'm not answering that question. Let's see. I wouldn't take your class. My Latin class? Well, that makes me sad. Let's see. How do we know when it's time to step in? Ooh, that's such a great question. If it's so important to step back, how do we know when it's time to step in? Pretend there's a line, like imagine a line in the sand in terms of like what your kid can and can't do, and then just put your toe over it. And that goes for neurotypical kids, and this goes for neurodivergent kids. Give them the opportunity to just prove you wrong. You should see the videos I get of the way little kids, people send me videos of their kids doing what they thought were impossible for their kids. And the glow on these children's faces is amazing. And I'm not saying you should let them go out and rent a log, a wood splitter, that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. But by scaffolding things and letting them try things that are naturally challenging for them, they will learn how to deal with those challenges. Okay. I don't know why this person is just so interested in whether or not I'm a Trump supporter. And she also wouldn't take my class. Bummer. Oh, well, there's a mean person in the comments, so I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Oh, because I'm a drunk. Oh, she called me a drunk in the comments. That's true. I am an alcoholic, but I haven't had a drink in 11 and a half years. It'll be 12 years on June 7th. So thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you indeed. Jess, my co-founder Bev and I have been doing this work for decades and decades and decades, longer than some of these parents have been alive. But what we have learned is that being authentic and telling parents what really works, like you're doing, is what we do.
Mhm.
Every book you held up, we know, or these people are on our video library, folks.
Mhm.
You can find Lisa Lewis, you can find Emily Edlin, you can find Anna Lemke on the Parent Venture Video Library YouTube channel. So thank you, thank you. Look at all those hearts, Jess. It was
Yeah, well, and I just
fantastic.
introduced you to a book for parents of younger kids. There's this wonderful book called How to Be a Person, and it's like oh, I didn't realize that that mean person is only sending those messages to me. Yeah, she's calling me a drunk and talking about my politics. Addressing an envelope, cleaning a toilet, emptying the dishwasher. I love this book. It's called How to Be a Person by Catherine Newman. She's a fantastic novelist, but this book is invaluable. I love that book so much.
That's right. Instead, we have people saying, you have been shining and sharing so much light and love. Thank you, Jess. That's what we're going to
Thank
say.
you so much. I
Shining
really
light,
appreciate it.
shining light. So everybody, this is an amazing book. This was a game changer. If you have not read it, please do. And Jess's new one, The Addiction Inoculation. Even as she said, if you think it's not important for you to know this stuff, it is. There's none of us that do not have some kind of substance use in the family, and our kids need to know it, right? Jess, I get to ask you one last question. Somebody like you, I love this question. Everything you've taught and read, what gives you hope?
I, you can't work with kids and not have hope. Like I said, there are 53 emails sitting in my inbox right now, and almost every single one of those kids just wants to be better. They want to be loved, they want to be better, they want to learn. And like, how can you read that kind of stuff or meet those kind of kids and not have hope? Like, that's just being around kids all the time. That's what gives me hope.
All right, that's beautiful. Parents, our secret is that Bev and I, we love parents, and this is a parent venture. But the truth is, we do it for the kids. So we thank you all for being with us, but special, special thank you to you, Jess Lahey. This is the first time we've had you in the parent venture. We are so honored. Don't know why it took so long. You were maybe too famous. We're just really glad.
I'm
Really
just happy
glad.
to be here.
Thank you, everybody. This video will be available soon. Jessica Lahey, we thank you tonight. So honored to have you with us. Take care, everybody. Take 2 seconds to tell us what you think in the survey. And again, hope to see you all soon. Lots of love, Jess.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.